Welcome to Hybiz News. My name is Suresh, kochattil. Ever since Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced the 20 lakh crore Atma Nirbhar Bharat package, there has been a huge amount of expectation from across different industrial, agriculture and even startups. Each sector wanted to know what's in it for them. That is but natural. But India's biggest employer is the micro, small and medium enterprises. Millions of them spread across the country, which till now did not have much to speak about their clout with the government. But many organizations in the past and even now are pitching in to put the MSME sector into the forefront so that they have a say in what's happening. The COVID-19 has impacted the MSME sector badly, and the lockdown had cost them dearly. Many of the MSME sector players feel that if the government does not help them, they will go under. And over the last 2 days, we have seen Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman doling out packages meant for each sector. The MSME sector is not exactly enthused by the package unveiled by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman on Wednesday, a day after the Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced a 20 lakh crore stimulus package under the Atma Nirbhar Bharat. While several industry captains and chambers of commerce have lauded the measures announced so far, the MSME sector appears to be less enthused. Rightly so. A handful of other sectors too feel that the economic package under the scheme for a self-reliant India unveiled by Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman may not be of much help to them in the immediate future. Well, there is a reason for it. For every section in the society, as she said, there is something in the Atma Nirbhar Bharat. Well, let's see what happens with the MSME sector. Some sectors have expressed their unhappiness in what they feel could have happened to them. Because within MSME, you have different segments. You have the micro, you have the small and the medium sectors. It is disappointing that for the small and medium enterprises, none of the announcements will help them immediately. Even the micro do not feel so. The only relief that all pending payments from the government departments will be cleared in 45 days. Well, quite often the government makes such announcements, but the big players usually don't follow the government's diktat. There is no interest waiver announced for COVID-19, which is one of the expectations. There was also an expectation that the GST will be reduced, but that is a big no-no right now because the state governments are under extreme pressure to ensure that it gets some revenues out of it. And if the central government fails to generate that revenues in GST, naturally that will also fall on the state government. Besides, the condition for availing the Provident Fund contributions have not been relaxed. This is one of the expectations that the MSME sector had, even though the government insists that they have been paying for the past 3 months for 12 plus 12, 24%, the employer and the employee contribution, and they will continue forward for the next 3 months. But many industrialists feel that it's very difficult to meet the norm that 90% of the employees should earn less than 15,000 as a monthly salary. That is a big roadblock. There is also a general opinion that the immediate financial support was a need for the hour for the micro and small units to resume their operations because they didn't have any cash with them. And in a world like India, where cash is the king, this was something that had to be done, but has not been done. But we hope it will be done. The MSME sector needs cash, and they need cash desperately. Some MSMEs want the government to pay the salary of their staff. This is something that I heard on some of the national channels, which I feel is a far-fetched thought. We cannot compare ourselves with the United States of America, where a similar measure is being done. And even the UK, where payments are being made to the unemployed. But those are countries which are not only rich, but also have very less government sector to pay out so that there's a lot of money left to be paid to the private sector, which is not the case in India. On the other hand, the new definition of micro, small and medium enterprises, which was kind of upgraded either in terms of investment or in terms of turnover, is not going to help the existing units according to the players. Many of the MSMEs, even before COVID-19, have been suffering, especially for the last 5 years, literally on a hand-to-mouth existence. Veteran players feel that 75% of the existing MSMEs will cease to exist in a post-lockdown scenario unless they either change the business model or get a huge infusion of cash. The new definition, according to the players in the industry, will help big companies enter the MSME sector because the turnover and also the investment numbers have gone up. So many of the big players will tend to set up smaller downstream MSME units, and that might kill the struggling units right now. There is also a complaint that the 10% working capital loans announced by the banks in March cannot be availed by the MSMEs because the banks insist on huge amount of paperwork and documentation. Of course, presently the government says that they will give out the loans without any collateral, but that also depends to be seen how the banks actually react to it, because we have seen in the past that whenever the government cut the interest rates and the repo rates, the banks have never passed on that benefits down to the consumer, be it the home segment, be it the auto segment, or even the industrial segment. So banks, again, you can't blame them for it. They're also wary of giving these loans to existing MSMEs because they feel that some of them may go bankrupt. Rightly so, because in the past, the bank managers and the senior management of the banks have faced CBI cases for loans given out. Not everybody is a Vijay Mallya or a Nirav Modi, but then who knows, because the cat that has once fallen into hot water is scared when it sees cold water too. There's no monitoring mechanism also to check what percentage of the loans have been sanctioned in the scheme by the banks. This is something that the government needs to do, because every week there needs to be a briefing as to saying this is the amount of loans that have been sanctioned, and there needs to be an interaction with the MSME bodies across the country to ensure, to check if they have any issues, because quite often Delhi is disconnected from the rest of the country, and this is something that the government, the Finance Ministry and the Reserve Bank of India has to do. The home buying segment, for example, feel that the EMI moratorium, of course this might come up in the later part of the announcement that I expected today and even tomorrow, has been not extended, and there's no interest waiver on the moratorium that has been extended. But then if you give an interest waiver, the banks will feel the pinch because they need to pay the depositors, and somewhere along the way the banks might go under. So the government rightly has not done that, but there could have been some reduction in interest that could have been done. Project extensions have already been granted under RERA. So the construction industry, the real estate industry, there has been no significant announcements apart from that what we saw on the first 2 days. However, the bigger players feel that banks are becoming severely risk averse, as I mentioned before, to lending and parking significant amounts with the RBI, because they need to keep some money with the RBI to follow up the repo rules, and that has choked up a lot of cash from the system. The government has also created an avenue for surplus in the banking system to find its way into the economy by standing guarantee, as I said before, to enable MSMEs to kickstart their operations. Don't worry about collateral, we will stand guarantee for you. Well, that's also happened in the Mudra, if you remember. But we got to see whether this will actually perk up the NPAs for the banks, because the banks are extremely scared that if an MSME sector goes under, they'll be in trouble. We also need to see a couple of other things. The decision to disallow tenders up to 200 crores in government procurement was a path-breaking move that was announced, and is also a step towards the self-reliance, the Atma Nirbhar Bharat. This was one move in the right direction to support the modern India, and what didn't take off really in the Make in India, because that is something should have been done long ago. But again here, will the big players, will the government sector hand out these handouts to anybody and everybody, their own relatives, their own friends in the MSME sector, because there's no tender? There has to be some method in the madness. The retail industry is also waiting for some more reform, because remember, most of the retail shops are shut. The government, of course, announced that, except for the single brand retail, multiple brands retail could open up. The kirana stores are anyway open. The supermarkets outside the malls are open. But slowly, the retailers in India need some working capital in the hand so that they are able to retain the employment, because these employees will leave and go somewhere else if they don't see job coming up in the next 15 days. The traders also across the country are much under financial distress. And if the government does not handhold the trading community, expectations are that 20% of the small business will die a natural death. Because in India, retail, trade, and the neighborhood kirana shop are the most important part of our ecosystem. Today we looked at the woes of the micro, small, and medium enterprises. There is a lot of innovation that has to come from the promoters of these MSMEs. At the same time, the government needs to ensure that, like China, India has a very strong MSME sector. We don't need to import thousands and thousands of pieces of stuff that is required from China. No, we don't need those millions of products that come out of China. We need to create our own MSME sector that will produce this. Prime Minister Modi had asked the chief ministers to tap into the potential of the companies that are moving out of China post-COVID and try and get them to India. There are a few issues, of course. Our labor laws are very, very strict. Our land acquisition is a nightmare. In China, all these are not an issue at all. We need to ensure that there needs to be a level playing field, and more importantly, there needs to be incentives, matching onto incentives, what Chinese government provides to the sectors in China and help them to dominate the market. We need to make this possible. Thank you for watching.